Justice Antonio Carpio, retired Justice Antonio Carpio. Thank you very much, Justice, for making time during a long weekend. Mahina bang internet ko, Justice?
Nawawala ka.
Yeah, baka yung
Yeah,
mahina.
nawawala ka. Okay na. Yeah.
Now, can you hear me, Justice? Thank you so much again for making time. Um, First of all, Justice, I mean, there are a couple of things we want to talk about. Obviously, I had the pleasure of joining you and some other folks sa Manila House the other day. That was a Chatham House rules-based discussion. Sayang nga, hindi lumabas yung mga laman ng discussion sana because I felt it was a very good discussion. So I was hoping to the degree that we can talk about those things that we discussed there. We talk about them because we talked about our concerns with magkakaroon ng legitimacy crisis, potentially constitutional crisis, and what kind of dangerous possibilities and temptations it could create. Interestingly, with Attorney Conti the other day, we ended suddenly out of nowhere, because RevGov, it popped out in her conversation, and she was mentioning when Cory Aquino had her own version of revolutionary government before, during the interregnum, no? From the fall of the Marcos dictatorship to the promulgation of 1997 Constitution. So I felt talagang kailangan natin balikan yan. And then Justice, of course, there are also some developments in the West Philippine Sea since last we talked, which is yung nagsalpukan yung dalawang Chinese vessels. So the other day, I was just talking to some people from the AFP. Parang aluminum yata yung ginagamit pag Coast Guard, no? Kaya sobrang wasak na wasak. And I think 2 Coast Guard personnel in China were killed. So that's quite a really scary situation kasi pag tinamaan tayo, you could have imagined many could have get killed also in the Philippine side. But before we go there, Justice Carpio, pag-usapan natin itong Ombudsman Office. So the Office of the Ombudsman is very, very important. And I hope you can remind everyone why the Office of the Ombudsman is so important. Because it has been vacant for more than a month now, or almost a month. And our hope is sooner or later, no, Justice, we'll have someone hopefully right there. I mean, your distant cousin, Conchita, the other associate justice, she served in that office. So, to be honest, most people remember her when you talk about ombudsman. But I think people should also remember we had this guy named Martires, right, who just resigned recently. Sorry, who finished his term recently, and in a way, nakalimutan ng tao ng trabaho ng ombudsman because critics would say because siguro hindi ginagawa ng mabuti yung trabaho ng ombudsman. Can you remind people how important is the ombudsman position in terms of accountability, justice, and may potentially may kinalaman din dapat yan sa mga flood control scandals, corruption scandals, and not to mention even the Sara impeachment issue. What are the stakes here with the ombudsman? Why should we watch it so carefully?
Well, the ombudsman is the independent body, no? So because the prosecutors, the NBI, the police, they're under the control of
Right.
the president, supervision and control of the president, no? So the president can reverse, modify, or amend their decisions, or stop them from investigating. But the ombudsman is totally independent. Can investigate anyone, even the
Right.
president can recommend to the Senate, to Congress, that an impeachable officer be subject to impeachment proceedings in the
Right.
House. So it's very powerful, the most powerful investigating officer in the Philippines now. And he can also suspend or dismiss government officials that
Oh,
are
wow.
not impeachable
Oh, wow.
because administrative cases can be filed before
Right.
him, and he can decide. And part of the penalty in under civil service rules is dismissal from separation from public service if you committed a serious or grave offense. No, so his position is very powerful in that sense.
Are there cases that come to your mind, Justice, in the past whereby the ombudsman was very decisive or played a decisive role, he or she? Because we just talked about former ombudsman and Justice Conchita Carpio Morales. What are there important cases in the past that comes to your mind, and what are the important cases in the present or in the near future that could be on the table here? I mean, with all the flood control project, floodgate of, I would say, expose that we're seeing right now. Not to mention also the Sara Duterte case, because she's not off the hook. It's not like the Supreme Court or Senate acquitted her of anything. Concerns, I mean, the debates have been more on the procedures of the impeachment.
Well, the during the time of Ombudsman Simeon Marcelo,
Right.
he investigated the military, and he was able to and also filed criminal cases against generals, and
Right.
he secured some convictions, and that was an example of ombudsman really working hard, no?
Right. Thank you for that case. I'm not familiar with that, so I didn't know it extended to even military. No, I mean that's sensitive civil military aspects. Just I want to ask you about this. Like, what are the qualifications for an ombudsman? Obviously, aside from you should be a lawyer, right? I suppose. So, who vets? The reason I'm asking this is because the other week may lumabas na I don't know fake news yata or I don't know what was it chismis fake news whatever na outgoing Justice Secretary Remulla was not fully qualified because of his supposed misconduct or at least involvement in the ICC arrest of Duterte. Uh, just as, for the person our audience, ano bang dapat qualifications and who vets them? Which body and is that body in itself an independent body? Like how does this work?
Well, the agency that vets that is the Judicial and Bar Council.
JBC,
So
yeah.
it's the Judicial and Bar Council that screens nominees and then submits a list of at least three to the president. And the president can choose only
Those
that
three.
list
Right.
from the JBC. So right now, I think the position is vacant since has been vacant since July 27 thereabouts, and the JBC now is in the process of interviewing the nominees, and one of the nominees is the incumbent Secretary of Justice,
Right.
and there was a case filed against him, administrative case filed by Senator Jaime Marcos, because he was part of that group that allegedly kidnapped President Duterte and put him on board a plane uh, to The Hague
You're right.
to be surrendered to the ICC. So that's a situation now.
Um, just to be clear, just I know again that you know we're supposed to talk about constitution and the West Philippines and among others, but again for the purpose of our audience, could a file being a case filed against you could that be automatically disqualificatory or like what are the grounds to disqualify a candidate or nominee for the ombudsman office and ano yung mga katangian na hinahanap ano yung mga what is the criteria uh, for the short list of three people that will be finally submitted to the president.
Well, part of the requirement is you must submit clearances from the NBI, from the ombudsman. You must submit clearances, and if you have a pending case, the JBC will look at that. If it's a serious case, if it may be a frivolous case, so they have the discretion to just ignore it if it's just obviously a frivolous case, no? And of course, you must have the highest integrity because you are going after those who violate anti-graft laws of the country. You must be a lawyer and a distinguished lawyer at that. You must be competent, shown competence. I think there's an age requirement also. I just
Yeah.
don't recall now what is the minimum age.
Yeah. Sorry again, just if I were asking too much all of the nitty gritties about this, but uh, sabihin natin, we get the quote unquote right ombudsman next. What could the next ombudsman do, he or she, on the issue of this all of the scandals about flood control projects? Because President Marcos seems to be very politically invested in this. President Marcos is visiting Bulacan, going across the country, galit na daw siya. So my expectation is ombudsman should be one of the institutions that should go after all of these wrongdoings, right? Because otherwise you're gonna leave it what to mudslinging among politicians. I mean, what role could the ombudsman play in terms of dealing with this? What seems to be now the most brazen form of corruption, at least in terms of news cycle.
Well, this falls right into the lap of the ombudsman because
Right. Yeah.
this is a huge amounts are involved.
Yeah.
Billions of pesos are involved. So he must give priority to cases like this. And this totally erodes the trust of the government in public expenditure of public funds. No? So the next ombudsman should immediately conduct an investigation on all these flood control projects, because the flood control budget per day is about 1.4 billion a day. Can you just imagine?
Yeah.
And
Wow.
it turns out there are ghost projects. And not only ghost, there are also substandards. There are no steel bars. They just pour concrete,
Yeah.
and of course, if there are no steel bars, then the ground shakes. It will gugu lahat yun, no? So this is something. Remember, the Napoles scam involved only tens of billions. This involves hundreds of billions.
So 10 times more at least than the PDAF scandal, which
Yes.
worked everyone up very much back in 2012, 2013. So just to put things into perspective, I mean, speaking of which, I mean, alam ko wala namang kinalaman yan, pero sabi nga ni Jingo Estrada, di ba? And of course, an emblem of integrity and good governance. Sabi niya, nakakadiri kayo, di ba? Sabi ni Jingo Estrada. At you even now have Mark Villar, our former distinguished DPW secretary, coming out and saying kailangan natin investigate yan. So, just we have a very interesting case of all sorts of different people becoming champions of good governance nowadays. And then you have other people who say a lot about flood control now, pero completely silent about flood control nung panahon ni Digong. Based on the numbers we saw by his last State of the Nation address, that's a year before he stepped down from office, he had finished more than 11,000 flood control projects, right? 7,000 of them here in Luzon. By the time he finished his term, more than 12,000 flood control projects were reportedly finished during Digong. We're talking about 1 trillion pesos spent over the past decade, bunch of which was during Duterte's time. So I wonder, Justice, how can we approach this issue in a way that we avoid some people weaponizing this issue for political score point, or papogi lang, or nakikisakay lang sa issue to deflect? I mean, how should we approach this issue? How important is for Ombudsman to come in and say, let's depoliticize it, let's do it the right way?
Well, this is tailor-made for the ombudsman, because
Yeah.
the Senate or the House should not investigate this because their members are involved. It involves
They can investigate themselves, yeah.
the budget that they appropriated for
Right.
these flood control projects, and they just inserted this during the BICAM. So it looks like that the criminal mind existed from the time the budget was
Right.
being deliberated on. So they should not be investigating this at all. It should be another body. I would propose that it should be the ombudsman, or
Right.
the president will create an independent body. But the ombudsman should tackle this.
Yeah, that could be the first major thing that would fall on the lap of the next ombudsman or incoming ombudsman, no? And the scale is just large. I mean, just as Carpio, we're just saying we're at least talking about 10 times bigger than the PDAF scandal, if not more, right? I mean, if we're talking about 1 trillion pesos over a decade, if you want to properly investigate it, this is nowhere close to the PDAF issue. And the reason I ask is because, you know, you were already in the Supreme Court by that time, diba, Justice? Because I remember you very well from the next major issues, the disbursement
I was
acceleration
there
program.
when we
Yeah.
struck down the PDAF, no? And that PDAF, the reason why we struck it down, because the congressman tried to be part of the implementation of the
allocated
projects.
Yeah.
They that's the role of that's the function of the executive. Congress appropriates the money, and once they appropriate, they have nothing to do with the implementation. That's the
Right.
check and balance there. It's the executive. But they put there in the law that they can recommend projects. So even that phrase recommend, we said that cannot be allowed.
Right.
They have nothing to do with the implementation. They can investigate if they want, but they cannot recommend or take part in the bidding, or in determining where this project should go, what project should be funded or not. So, but now it looks like that they are the spirit, the moving force behind
Yeah.
this flood control project. So I think this should be investigated by the Ombudsman, not by the Senate, not by the House.
Yeah, I mean, sa sobrang spirit na nag-move, naging ghost na rin yung projects. I mean, uh, the scale
You
is...
know, this one is really eroding the trust of the people in government, and people are talking, as you said, of RevGov. I mean, if this continues, everything is hopeless here in this country. That's the thinking now. If
Yeah.
after the Napoles come, you have these flood control projects come. When will this end? I
Yeah.
mean, when will the legislators learn their lesson?
Yun nga, yung curb your greed, no? Curb your greed. I mean, because the thing with the flood control issue is that it really brought to into focus yung sinasabi ng tao, alam namin lahat ng bansa naman may corruption, lalo-lalo na yung mga ka-level lang natin. We can talk about 1MDB in Malaysia, we can talk about the Samsung family scandals in Korea. Pero ito kasi talaga grabe, no? Parang talagang curb your enthusiasm. Kanina lang si Vico Soto, Mayor Soto was calling out certain media personalities allegedly who were interviewing yung mga kalaban niya na mukhang involved dito sa mga DPWH projects na yumaman at allegedly giving millions of pesos to people who will interview them for their shows and all, for them just to have. So even Vico Soto, I mean, I think Vico Soto definitely is seen as someone who's non-partisan, is coming out there. But definitely Justice Carpio, there are people who are trying, I mean, you have people from PDP Laban, hindi ko na pangalan yung mga sino. You have people who worked during Digong's time, all coming out and super galit na galit. There are people who were in charge of DPWH during the Duterte's time coming out. What should be the approach of the Ombudsman? Should he just investigate what happened in the past fiscal year, in the past 2-3 years, or should you look at the significant amount of time, looking at huge amount of money we're looking at? How far can the Ombudsman go in terms of investigating? Is there a statutory like limitation or something like that?
Well, because of the amount involved, the statute of limitations here is more than 15 years.
More than 50 years, perfect, right? So at least you can cover 3 administration, para fair. Aquino administration, Duterte administration, and halfway into the Marcos administration. I think 15 years would make perfect sense. Kasi people were asking, so anong cut-off mo? Why not balik na tayo all the way to Marcos Sr., di ba? Kung ganyan lang. So no, at the very least, you have to make sure it's not like 1 or 2 administration, especially if the amount is so big. So what you're saying, Justice Carpio, is we can go all the way back to 2010, basically when Pinoy started.
Yeah, we can go back because of the amount. I think if I recall correctly, the prescription period now is about 18 years.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a very important clarification, Justice, because people are wondering, ano yung cutoff? And Justice, could there be a kind of multiple bodies, like a national task force on this formed by the executive, but at the same time, Ombudsman does a parallel investigation? How do you make sure there's no overlap or spaghetti ball effect, as some would say it?
Well, what the Ombudsman can do is to prioritize the big
The big
projects.
ones, yeah.
Start with the biggest, work down to the smallest. So that would be a good criterion. Nobody can complain.
And the president unveiled yung 15 biggest contractors getting what, a huge share of all of the projects.
Start with the 15 biggest contractors.
Yeah, I think the data is already there, no? So I don't think it would be too hard for the ombudsman to come in. Can the ombudsman also do something about the Sara Duterte situation in terms of, so it looks like for the time being, I don't know, whatever the Supreme Court will decide, we're not going to bet on that. But if the trial of Sara is not going to happen, at least until, let's say, the next impeachment is filed next February, assuming it will be filed again, can the ombudsman come in on the Sara Duterte issue, especially on allegations of, ill-gotten wealth or look into the bank accounts? Kasi alam ko, diba, Justice, the ombudsman can even act on anonymous tip or something like that.
Yes, the ombudsman can come in anytime.
Yeah.
Because of that provision in the SALN, the Statement of Assets and Liabilities and Net Worth, that when you file your SALN, you say, I hereby authorize the ombudsman to verify my statement of assets and liabilities based on appropriate government records, and that includes the AMLA,
Appropriate.
the
Yeah.
Anti-Money Laundering Council, to verify whether the statement of assets levels is
Accurate.
truthful, no? So that's
Right, right,
independent,
right, right.
separate from the impeachment case, because that is his regular function. He should check the veracity, the truthfulness of the statements of assets and liabilities.
Yeah, so yung dun pwede pumasok yung
Yeah.
if there are
Yes.
money laundering concerns or some questionable bank transfers, etc. Um, Going back again to the ombudsman, how high can the ombudsman go? Can the ombudsman investigate the president, the vice president? What
He
is the
can
immunity?
investigate anyone, including
Anyone,
the president.
including the
When it
president.
comes to impeachable officers, he can investigate, and there is a ground for impeachment. He submits his recommendation to the House for the House to
Okay, so
start
that's how it's gonna
impeachment
work.
proceedings.
So if let's say theoretically the ombudsman comes in, investigates, and finds something questionable, it can submit it for potentially the next round of impeachment that like parang ganun ang mangyari, Justice.
Yes, because he cannot you cannot file a criminal case against an impeachable officer. You have to impeach him first. No.
Right, right. So therefore you can, so theoretically if ever this impeachment trial doesn't move forward, the next impeachment trial in theory could be bolstered by an more activist ombudsman, to put it mildly, because I'm not sure what I can say about the legacy of the former ombudsman. Some would even say the former ombudsman was allegedly even protecting, on the Stalin issue, among others, the officials. But here, so you can see a situation where the ombudsman can actually provide additional evidence that the House of Representatives could use. Uh, but let's say in terms of timing, again, I know this is very hypothetical. I'm not saying mag-Mark Oleta, Tito Soto tayo, Justice Carpio. Yung parang, hypothetical, ayaw kong sagutin. Hindi, kaya nga, pero hindi. Sabi natin, for some reason, hypothetically, the Supreme Court reverses or not or modifies its decision, paves the way, again, hypothetically, for the Senate to unarchive the Sara impeachment trial. In that interregnum, can the ombudsman supplement the impeachment articles that were forwarded, or hindi na sa next dapat, something like that? Like what I'm saying is that yung impeachment article na na-forward ngayon sa Senate, pwede ba i-buttress ng incoming ombudsman or hindi na? Dapat separate na yan.
Well, the ombudsman can do his regular duty, that is, verify the statement of assets and liabilities, independent of the impeachment.
And again, hypothetically, a prosecution can use that in a Senate trial.
Well, the prosecution will have to subpoena the records from the ombudsman.
Exactly. So again, theoretically, I'm just saying, I'm just showing to people why many people are watching very carefully who's gonna be the next ombudsman, right? Because actually, ang daming powers ng ombudsman, no, Justice. Do you think people are even appreciating how powerful an ombudsman could be if you have a right person there?
Yeah, if you have the right person, tutuwid ang Pilipinas. If you have the right ombudsman there.
Yeah, absolutely. And to what degree is the ombudsman office, like, do they have enough resources? What I'm saying here is that, like, kasi kung dami mong babanggan, do they have enough people, enough resources? Kasi ang daming investigative work yan, no? Ang daming lawyers ng babanggan mo dyan dun sa kabilang team. Do you think our ombudsman is well funded enough considering the scale of the potential cases we're facing?
Well, the ombudsman can prioritize the high-profile cases.
Right.
But for the ombudsman to investigate everybody who needs to be investigated, they obviously don't have the sufficient manpower. But they don't have to do that. All they have to do is to prioritize, go after the big ones, and that will put everybody on the right path, no?
Right. And pave the way for other parallel institutions, maybe a national task force, something to come in, no? Just as does it make sense for Marcos to also create a special body to investigate the flood control projects and all? Kind of an independent, non-partisan body. Yeah.
There can be a commission. The president can create also an independent body. But definitely, you cannot expect the House or the Senate to investigate themselves.
Yeah. Which interestingly is what, diba, Sandro Marcos, the presidential son, said, diba, na parang kami sa Kongreso, don't expect us to investigate. So get someone else to do it, right? Do it properly and independent and all of that. Again, I'm very, for me kasi, Justice Carpio, we're all against corruption, but we want this done properly and effectively, right? Otherwise, kung sino-sino na lang nakikisakay dito sa issue na yan eh. Diba? I mean, like, it's just shocking. Yung mga iba nandidiri na bigla sa ganitong corruption when we're like, you wanna go through your own record or something like that. But, Justice, let's go back to the RevGov issue, right? Because obviously there are many moving parts. Um, how afraid, how concerned are you for dun sa kalagayan ng ating bansa? Because as we speak, practically every major institution is under question, right? BBM is being attacked right and left. Kanina lang, allegedly sinabi ni Sara na lasinggero daw ito or something like that. Na, kaya nag-resign siya kasi lasing daw si BBM ng 10 a.m. Like, everyone is attacking everyone, right? The Senate President, Jesus Escudero, is being accused of making some questionable insertions. A couple of senators are being accused of basically laying the ground for their next office if they want to run for governor or somewhere else. And then you have the Congress already always attacked. It's not like the Congress has a stellar reputation, although interestingly now they have a higher approval rating than Senate, which just tells you how bad the situation of the Senate is. I call it the Kilai curve. Grabe yung baba nung yung approval ng Senate. So in short, I mean, just we can go on and about it, right? With very few exceptions. And then, of course, let's not talk too much about it. But even your dear former institution, Supreme Court, right? There are also people who found the recent decision controversial. Oh, I think a certain Justice Carpio also did not agree. So are we moving to sleepwalking towards a kind of a constitutional crisis, a legitimacy vacuum or crisis that could create some very dangerous possibilities, Justice?
Well, there is an increasing talk on RevGov, which is natural if the institutions, the major institutions of government, are not performing as expected. People are really dismayed at what's happening now with the flood control project, with the impeachment. So, of course, there will be people who are saying that you cannot expect anything from Congress anymore, from the Senate, from the President, even from the judiciary. So they naturally would go for a RevGov, which is really to be expected. But I think we have enough responsible people in government to address the issue, and we hope that they will act correctly and promptly, because we cannot leave it this way. We just have to resolve this correctly so that people will have hope that we will not slide down to become a bankrupt nation, because the way we're doing it now, if can you just imagine 60% of our budget is really borrowed money. Yeah. And in other words, 60% of these billions of pesos going into flood control projects are borrowed money.
Wait. So what you're saying just is that hindi lang ninakaw yung pera natin. Hindi lang ninakaw yung pera. Yung ninakaw, babayaran pa natin in the future. Yeah,
we'll have to pay for all of this.
Yeah, exactly.
Wastage of money.
Yeah.
So there will come a time when people will say, why do we have to pay our taxes if it will just go to waste? So we have to address these issues, because this will undermine the legitimacy of the government. And of course, people will look at the alternative of a RevGov. No? And people are talking about this also. We cannot stop them from talking about it. But that's why it's important that the people in government must address this issue to the satisfaction of the general population.
Ano yung mahakbang na dapat makikita natin, Justice Carpio, sa mga susunod na araw or susunod na buwan to restore a certain degree of confidence in our institution, or at least prevent the downward spiral? How can we prevent, ano yung mga kailangan dito? So, kanina we discussed the Ombudsman, right? So, Ombudsman could be, if not the Deus Ex Machina, could be part of the solution. Anong package of solution you see here, Justice, to prevent us moving towards a downward spiral of constitutional crisis?
Yeah, the ombudsman could be the knight in shining armor here.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
if a new ombudsman will just make the right moves in the first few months, that
Yeah.
could reassure the public that somebody uh, is uh, is acting like an adult in the room. There's an adult in the room, no? But right now, there's no one.
Yeah. So where should that adult come from? Justice Carpio, like civil society, or like how do you see it coming? Yeah.
Well, if there's an ombudsman and he starts investigating the flood control project, that's it. I mean,
Yeah.
that will reassure the people.
What do you want to see from President BBM, for instance? Ano yung mga hakbang na dapat gagawin ni President BBM in the coming months and years? Well, at the same time, of course, he has to be realistic, right? If he goes after everyone, next thing you know, baka half of his coalition collapses too, right? And then it backfires and they defect to the Duterte side, right? I mean, there's also the realpolitik considerations here.
Well, since he started this, he started with the top 15
Yeah, might as well.
contractors. Sabi nila, mahiya kayo. He
Yeah.
has to follow through. Because if he backs off now, then people will say, Ningas Kugon, no?
Yeah.
Ampaw. He has to follow through.
Yeah, he has to follow through. And this is interesting. Again, you were in the Supreme Court during that time. Can we go back to Pinoy's time? Because mahabang usapan pag digong eh, di ba? Let's talk about Pinoy's time because I think today is Ninoy's Aquino, obviously. So of course, we commemorated, and of course, we remembered his sacrifice and martyrdom and all today. But speaking of the Aquino that ended up as the president, at least, well, the second one, that is the son. Speaking of Pinoy justice, again, I think it's important to ask you because you had the PDAF scandal. Obviously, hindi niya kasalanan yan. But the disbursement acceleration program was an issue, right? And you guys in the Supreme Court back then ruled it as unconstitutional. When you talk to the Aquino admin people, and we had some of them on this show, is that they were saying, kaya nga nagkaroon kami ng DAP para lang walang underspending at maayos yung paggastos namin. Anyway, what I'm saying is that medyo mixed bag, no? Yung Aquino administration's legacy, eh. Diba? It's not a clear-cut juxtaposition here. I mean, obviously, President Aquino was clean. There's no trace of corruption. He was not a mass murderer. Hindi siya galing sa ill-gotten wealth, yes. Hindi siya kadiliman nor kasamaan. Yeah, that's a given. But I think some people are also kind of romanticizing, I would say, the Aquino era. Ang daming mga hindi nagawa. Tapos may mga katulad ng disbursement acceleration program which you guys found unconstitutional. I remember also yung press con ni Pinoy, di ba? God bless his soul. He kind of tried to defy you guys, right? Or he kind of questioned your ruling. Can we talk about it? I mean, in spirit of due respect to the Aquino family and all the good things they did for our country and their good intentions.
Well, on the PDAF, I mean, it's obvious that because of the separation of power, the congressman should not implement
Yeah.
projects. They legislate, they approve the budget, but that's the end of it.
That's the end of it. Yeah.
On the DAP, it's a juggling of funds, and that's not allowed also under the Constitution. I mean, you cannot transfer appropriations from one item to the other unless it is savings, because that's in the Constitution. That's also
Yeah.
a safeguard that the president cannot just
Reshuffle, yeah.
use the budget of the executive as a pork barrel. I mean, if
Slush fund, yeah.
the funds have been appropriated for a particular purpose, it should be used for that purpose because that's the law. Congress has said appropriate 1 billion to build this bridge. The president cannot just use that money to build to let's say to build a schoolhouse, even if it's for a good purpose.
Yeah.
But that's for a particular, that's a law. You have to follow it. In other words, you
Right.
cannot use that money to build something else because you have to follow the law. That's basic. He was saying that I will be hobbled. I mean, I don't have, but there are many things the there are many savings
Yeah.
in government in the budget that he can use to augment other items. Uh, but we have to preserve the clear language of the Constitution that if it's approved by Congress for a particular purpose, and there is no reason why you should not follow that purpose, then do it. So it's all boils
Mm.
down to the rule of law again, because if you say that, okay, Mr. President, you are the president, you can juggle the funds. I mean, we don't want that to happen also.
In spite of good intention, I mean that's an important point you raise, Justice. No, I mean, yes, I think President Aquino in that press conference, he criticized your decision, right, from Supreme Court, and he felt parang basically iniipit niyo yung kamay ko, hindi ko magagawa yung mga kailangan kong gawin. And I think by this time, was it 2014, Justice, when the ruling came out?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but you have to remember, Richard, that the budget comes from the president. He was the one who proposed this.
Right.
He proposes the national expenditure program to Congress, and Congress approves it, and that becomes the law. He cannot say that I didn't, I don't want that. It came from him. And there's also his power to transfer savings. And also towards the, let's say, later part of the year, if the fund has not been disbursed yet, because there was a flood, you cannot start the construction, then you can declare it as a savings. I mean, there is a lot of leeway for the president, but you cannot say on day one, I want to use these funds for another purpose.
That's an overreach, basically. That's an
Yeah,
executive overreach. Yeah,
yeah,
we talk about judicial
yeah.
overreach the other time, but this is executive overreach. No, no, gusto kong balikan yung mga issue na yung pasensya na, Justice. I know like this may not seem like we're you know, we might be getting all over the place, but yun nga, like we're so focused on Marcos and Duterte. I think sometimes we forget, like, okay, what came before that? And as I said, with all due respect, I also remember we had a lot of problems. I remember I even wrote a piece for Foreign Affairs magazine around this time. Noy Noy stumbles. I don't think Pinoy was happy with that piece, among others. But I remember there were lots of problems in back in the day. And I appreciate that you made it clear. Just it's not a question of good intentions. You have to make sure you want to make sure that the government, the executive doesn't have too many prerogatives to create a slush fund, right? I mean, lucky
Yeah.
tayo with Pinoy, but what if it was someone else na sobrang corrupt din kung ano nang gagawin niya, di ba? So I see where you're coming from, Justice. With that, what I'm trying to communicate here to our audience is, ang hirap din yung situation natin with infrastructure issues and concerns with corruption for a very long time. Hindi ito bagong issue. Kaya sabi ko, kailangan talaga natin magkaroon ng comprehensive, longitudinal understanding na saan galing itong problema ng corruption and how we should deal with it. But Justice, I know you're not Transparency International or you're not the corruption expert per se, but from your own understanding as a former magistrate, as a jurist, as a proactive Filipino citizens, do you think corruption has got worse over the years with the line?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
You can see it. I
yeah,
mean, you look at the billions now, tens or hundreds of billions
yeah,
of pesos compared to the Napoles scam.
yeah.
This is really big time. I mean,
Right.
and it's so brazen. It's a ghost project. I mean, there were ghost projects in Napoles, but this one is just the scale is just the magnitude is so high up there. I mean, it's practically the work of a criminal syndicate.
Right, right, right.
This is the work of a criminal syndicate.
So apparently, Pogo are not the worst thing that happened to the Philippines. Kasi, di ba, for a long time, Justice, puro tayong Pogo, Pogo, Pogo. And then nung lumabas ito, wait lang, parang something even crazier syndicato stuff is going on here.
Yeah, well, that's it. Pogo is another kind of criminality because the victims are directly the people. I mean, our bank accounts are being there's a phishing scam. No, we're the
Yeah.
subject of a phishing scam. But this one is something else. You're talking here of tens of billions of pesos here.
Scamming our national budget, basically. Yeah, I mean, like, wow. Again, Justice, I don't want to belabor this point too much, pero bakit kaya lumala pa yung corruption? I mean, you would have imagined na habang yumayaman ang Pilipinas, kasi syempre lumaki din ang budget natin, ang laki ng budget natin kumpara sa 2010, parang Pinoy's time pa lang, we quadrupled, I think, our budget or at least tripled, I remember. So, habang our per capita income is 50 or 60% higher from 15 years ago, mas malaking middle class natin, mas maraming social media. Why is the Philippines becoming more corrupt rather than less corrupt, considering we are supposed to have more scrutiny and more, I don't know, civil society mobilization? Are we getting even worse people into power? The reason I ask is that hindi ba same dynasties rin naman andyan ever since? It's not like we have a major change in our, yeah, iba yung president, pero basically it's the same people still running
Well,
the show.
the analysis of one group, I've been talking to
Right.
several groups, and one group special, their analysis is this, that because the political dynasties are now in control of Congress, how do they maintain
Yeah.
their power? How do they remain in power? They insert pork barrel
Yeah.
in the budget, and they use this during election. And once they're elected, the cycle continues. It's
Vicious,
another
yeah.
cycle.
Vicious.
And
Yeah.
so, in fact, the number of political dynasties have increased in the House, in the Senate,
Yeah.
and in the LGUs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can just imagine, because their source of vote buying is the budget, national budget, ACAP, all those names.
Sure.
You have the ACAP, you have the, what are the other, ayuda, all kinds of
Yeah.
ayudas they
Right.
insert in the budget, and they use this to elect themselves. And it keeps on growing. So,
Yeah.
and the analysis of these people is that is really our problem now, because it has become a vicious cycle. The corruption will increase over time because they need to maintain themselves in power, and to maintain themselves in power, they have to buy votes. And where do they get the money to buy votes? They get it from the budget.
Right. Right. Well, I want to talk about this justice because we'll shortly talk about the West Philippine Sea issue, di ba? Parati natin sinasabi sa West Philippine Sea, kailangan natin ng whole of nation approach, right? Parati natin sinasabi, hindi lang tayo pwede umasa sa gobyerno. Hindi lang pwede ito ay labanan lang ng ating sandatang lakas at saka yung PLA ng China, blah, blah, blah. Na basically, dapat may say ang taong bayan, may participasyon ng taong bayan, etc. Shouldn't we have a counterpart for that, Justice? I mean, a kind of a robust good governance movement. I mean, yes, in theory, that could be pink movement, that could be, one sambayan, right? I mean, how can we, Justice, how can we crystallize a strong anti-corruption movement that supports this, right? And also make sure it doesn't get out of control. Remember, dun sa isang conversation natin, I mentioned the case of Brazil, di ba? Where na-weaponize yung anti-corruption scandal dun sa Operation Car Wash. Kung, the next thing you know, kung sino-sino na target and got out of control, the whole thing collapsed. Bolsonaro became their president, right? Like, that was their version of RevGov, right? Getting a crazy guy as their president, right? And they're still dealing with that Bolsonaro legacy until now. Na 50% tariff nga sila kasi kaibigan ni Trump, ayaw ni Trump makulong ito. I mean, what I'm saying is that what can we do in the civil society to make sure hindi lang tayo umaasa sa Ombudsman, hindi lang tayo umaasa sa NTF, some sort of national task force by BBM, or etong news cycles lang. Kumbaga, parang hindi itong news cycle issue. Ang worry ko ka, Justice, baka next month, iba na naman ang topic. Nakalimutan na naman natin ito as if nothing happened.
Well, we've talked about that in Isambayan, and
Yeah.
that's why we filed a case before the Supreme Court for the Supreme Court to direct Congress to enact already the anti-dynasty law,
Right.
because the Constitution says the state shall prohibit political dynasties.
Right,
Shall prohibit
right.
political dynasties as may be defined by law. So, political dynasties are prohibited, but Congress has to define what is a political dynasty.
Right.
It's been almost 40 years now, and the Congress has not defined it. And in the meantime, there are more members of Congress who belong to political dynasties. So, there's a group of people who are saying the only way is a RevGov. I said, wait a minute, let's go to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Ask the Supreme Court to direct Congress.
Right.
Because if that is your analysis, that our number one problem are the political dynasties because they have controlled the budget now and they're using the budget to perpetuate themselves in power, let's strike at the very heart
Right.
to get the political dynasties banned as mandated by the Constitution. So these people joined me,
Yeah.
joined the Sambayan, and the bishops, the clergy joined. So it's a big group that went to the Supreme Court. And so it's now before the Supreme Court. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to provide a solution that's within the Constitution.
Right.
We don't want RevGov. We want a constitutional solution to this failure of Congress to enact the anti-dynasty law. So we're there now, and we hope that the Supreme Court will take this seriously because this is a very grave matter.
Right. So while we're waiting
Because
for
that was before we filed it before the flood control scam came out,
Right.
and this has really aggravated, really by several degrees aggravated the issue because it's now crystal clear to everybody. It's the biggest scams come from the budget now.
Well, then, therefore, maybe Justice, aside from 15 biggest contractors, we also look at the 15 biggest dynasties of benefit. Like, right? I mean,
Pareho na yun.
yeah,
The political dynasties are behind this 15.
that's what I'm saying. Like, maybe we need a listahan. Kasi biglang ngayon, the heat is on contractors eh. So, pagkausap mo yung contractors, bakit kami? Eh, ano lang, kasapat lang naman yung mga walang yung politiko na yan eh. Di ba?
Lalabas yan.
Exactly. So, although, how do you respond, Justice, to some, at least I heard one governor saying, ay, hindi ko alam, meron pala kami flood control. What if ganun yung, di ba, yung isang governor, meron pala kami flood, hindi ko alam yan, di wala nga nagsabi sa akin eh. Ano, paano mo yan, Justice, there are people running their own mafia shows here and there na hindi alam ng governor? I mean, how is it, what kind of system is this?
Well, that's why the Ombudsman has to go after
Yeah.
follow the paper trail.
Yeah. So, pwede rin i-amlak yan, parang yung ombudsman din sa, pwede rin nila, kasi kung ganun kalaking kita mo, baka may money laundering.
Well, I'm sure that's flag already because
Yeah.
automatic yan. If you deposit any amount
Huge,
beyond
yeah.
500,000, it's automatically reported to
Yeah.
the AMLAC.
Right. 5,000 pesos, hindi dollars, no?
Yeah, pesos.
Pesos, okay. So, baka mag-deposit nila by 499. Dapat ganun, magmahanap ka ng 499,900. Justice, we're going to the last part of our discussion. So, basically, what you're saying is, let's look at the ombudsman. Very, very important yung job ng ombudsman. That's basically the gist of our discussion today. We're hoping the Supreme Court also acts on these issues. Also, the confidential fund, diba, Justice? That's another slush fund being used. Related lahat yan eh. It's really a kind of an orchidaceous, basically bonfire of corruption and greed. Last one, Justice, I want to ask you because ultimately, diba, well, you come from your own world, but I came fundamentally from a foreign policy standpoint, diba? Kaya nga lang naging active ako sa domestic politics is because nung si Digong naging president, sabi nako, parang mayor to maging presidente. So I had to really understand domestic politics, diba? So it made me really invested because I realized if we are domestically weak, we're internationally weak. If we're domestically divided, yaya rin tayo sa West Philippine Sea. If our president is a puppet of China, then tapos na usapan. Diba? As simple as that. So that's why I've been obsessed with Philippine politics over the past decade because I realized we cannot talk about West Philippine Sea. We don't understand our domestic political situation. But having said that, Justice, how worried are you with... Yeah, I know there's this chatter about China making big moves on Batanes, whatever, but let's just talk about what we have already seen. Yung last week na nagbanggaan yung dalawang Chinese na yung barko at dalawa allegedly namatay according to Senator Lacson, although I was trying to confirm this with the AFP and all. Does that mean that China is now willing to use deadly force na to enforce their point? or was that just a freak accident and miscommunication or something? What should we do? I mean, what is your reading of the situation?
Well, I think they were trying to ram again that Coast Guard vessel.
Yeah,
No, probably not to sink it, but to
damage it. Yeah,
like what they did before, butasan nila, no?
yeah.
But unfortunately for them, they they mishandled it. So thanks to the great seamanship of
Yeah.
our
Manny
Coast
Pacquiao
Guard.
maneuvering, I would say. Like, nag-ano siya. Galing eh. Yeah, yeah.
But we should expect this from the Chinese.
Yeah.
Although President Xi is in trouble right now, so we don't know what will happen. I expect that if there's a new regime in Beijing, it will not be as bad as President Xi's group.
Also, Justice, now you want a constitutional crisis in China, but not in the Philippines. Mag-rev-gov sila, Justice. Do you think a rev-gov in China will help our
Well,
situation?
they're trying their best to have a peaceful transition.
Exactly,
Although
yeah.
everybody knows that they have already movements of their troops, whole armies are
Yeah.
replacing those guarding Beijing and their retreat area of the Politburo. So, we expect some huge changes in the leadership soon. No?
Oh, wow. I mean, so it's lang palang magre-rev-gov. All this time tayo nagpapanik, no? Well, maybe that's a good rev-gov if ever it happens. But my worry just is a weaker, insecure China might be even more unstable, right? I mean, look at Russia, right? They're a declining superpower kaya nagpapanik sila kung ano ng kalokohan ng ginagawa nila. Some would even say US is also another declining superpower kaya may Trump ka. So I just hope whatever happens in China, they don't go more aggressive, yeah.
I think relatively the Chinese economy might be better than the U.S. economy.
Exactly, and they have stronger manufacturing. They're beating US everywhere. AI, everything, di ba? Nagpapanik ka. But yung Intel nga, iba-buy out ng Trump admin or at least buy a stake there. So,
Yeah, because the inflation has spiked really in the U.S. now, no, and they're
yeah.
worried about recession. So the high tariffs are starting to bite already.
Yeah, they might get a stagflation, right? Low growth, high inflation, which is the worst of both worlds' economics. Thank you, Justice, so much for that fantastic discussion. 1 hour, just sobrang breezy pagkausap ka. But just, I was really glad that we discussed the ombudsman issue, no? I think mahalaga talaga ang ombudsman, and people tend to always overlook. Like, it's not just the Senate, Supreme Court, or Congress, or the President. There are other important institutions. So thank you so much, Justice, for importing your point of view, and looking forward to catching up with you with our illegal luminaries and the rest of the gang, putting it together in justice. And of course, Justice, napansin mo, may hindi ako pinag-usapan in spirit of everything. I'll just keep it there. Maraming salamat, Justice Carpio. And
Thank you, Richard.
God
Yeah.
bless. Talk to you soon. Salamat po.
Okay.
Thank you so much, guys. Maraming salamat also for following us. I'll try to upload this as soon as I can. Catch up tayo soon, guys. Catch up. Marami tayong mga uploads. Booyakasha.